as someone who's been involved in paranormal research it's been almost 4 decades now that I've been investigating cases of paranormal activity, and a lot of that has been demonic. Those same things that the devil does in those kinds of cases, the devil's doing in these spacecraft, UFO, and alien visitation cases. This is a religion for so many people, and they really think that we are going to be saved by the technology of the extraterrestrials. There's worldwide seances going on, essentially, where people are trying to commune with these beings.
Big things happening, like potential UFO invasions. There's been talk about that. But what I find interesting is those that are seemingly paying the most attention are talking about demons, really. In fact, Tucker Carlson seems to think that, and a bunch of other people. But it's this book here, Ursula Bielski, that I want to have a conversation around. She is a Catholic. She spent a long time, many, many years, studying the paranormal, and it cost her big. And she came back to her Catholic faith, and she has a lot to say today. We're going to be linking the dots between UFO, extraterrestrial technology, and maybe even the Antichrist coming on a spaceship. Wouldn't that be interesting? All of that today on the program. By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below. There's a brand new book out called The Devil in Dreamland, A Catholic Faith, UFOs, the Occult, and the End of the Supernatural by Ursula Bielski. One of the most absolutely fascinating things for me was on the issue of the Antichrist, because I've heard this theory before. In fact, I've spoken to Daniel O'Connor about his book as well. And on page 218, you say, Gabriel predicts apocalyptic events such as the return of Jesus Christ on a mothership spaceship and a forthcoming planetary evacuation for which he and his followers are preparing. This is several stories that you share in the book. And then there was the one about the guys that were in the military that went AWOL, and they came to a conference back in the United States, and they were receiving instruction. They were receiving their instruction through Ouija boards. And part of what they said, too, was they expected the Antichrist to come by way of a spaceship from outer space. There's lots of stories that are similar to that. It would seem that it might be very, very interesting to contemplate that the Antichrist could come in a means that would convince both Jews and Muslims, as well as many Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, and everybody else, to all be on the same page in worshiping him as a promised Messiah. I think that might be the way that gets done. What do you say?
Yeah, it's very interesting. That theme runs through ufology going back decades. This idea that there's some kind of trajectory that we're on to get everybody, like you said, on the same page, and to essentially end up kind of forcing people to remove all of our biases so that the extraterrestrials can deal with us as just the human race. And that, of course, will start with religion. So we'll have to get rid of all of our religions so that we can all be on the same page to advance under the tutelage of these beings that are, of course, so much superior to us. And that's very disturbingly runs through all of ufology, including through the secular crowd. And they've, of course, been raised on, most recently, Ancient Aliens, which is, this blockbuster television show that teaches that aliens created us, aliens created Jesus, and that they're going to come back and save us from ourselves eventually. Even the earliest and the most prominent secular ufologists, like, for example, Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée, for those who don't know, he was the inspiration for Steven Spielberg for the character of the French scientist in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So he's a real person, and he is the most respected ufologist. And in the late 1960s, he was already saying these are not physical beings. These are some kind of paraphysical entities that we're dealing with. And he was one of the first to talk about the fact that the way that these things, the way that they interact with humans, the things that humans are identical to the things, for example, they're doing in the cultures of Europe, for example, and they're just in a different guise. And now I think it's really important to point this out. And I don't know Daniel O'Connor always is make sure to point this out too. 97% of these encounters are explicable, right? Their technology day when, if there was, the most high tech technology, it was the government's. But today, there is, hundreds of billions of dollars in research and technology in the private sector. So the government doesn't even know what's going on. And I think the hugest part of this whole thing is governments trying to cover up what they do know, their space programs and their technology programs, and to cover up what they don't know. So it's a way to say it's a way for them to sort of get out of the fact that they don't know what's going on, whether it's other foreign governments or whether it's our private sector research. So most of this is technology, governmental programs, private sector technology, governments, delusions, illusions, wishful thinking, so many people that want this stuff to be true. And then there's that small percentage. And I talk about this in the book that as someone who's been involved in paranormal research it's been almost 4 decades now that I've been, investigating cases of paranormal activity. And a lot of that has been demonic. And you notice that those same things that the devil does in those kinds of cases, the devil's doing in these spacecraft, UFO, and alien visitation cases. And one of those things is mimicry, where the devil takes the form of the guise of what someone wants to see, what someone expects to see. And I see this over and over again in paranormal investigation of ghosts and hauntings and things. And that's, I think, what's happening in a lot of these cases. People want dust. This is a religion for so many people. And they really think that we are going to be saved by the technology of the extraterrestrials. And people want to see spaceships. They want to have relationships with extraterrestrials. People are summoning aliens on a daily basis. People belong to groups that summon aliens at the same time every day. So there is it's crazy, but there's worldwide seances going on essentially where people are trying to commune with these beings.
Link for us, if you could, Aleister Crowley and the Roswell event, 1947, and the UFO craze that we're all, air quotes, enjoying these days. How is Aleister Crowley connected to that?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And this is all common knowledge to ufologists who know all of these intricacies and all these characters. But Aleister Crowley was extremely influential on the founder of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Jack Parsons, who was a major occultist. And he's, the father of rocketry. We wouldn't have NASA without Jack Parsons. He was housemates with L. Ron Hubbard, founder of Scientology. Wow. In 1946, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard performed a ritual that Crowley called the Babylon working, which was essentially to bring about the birth of the Whore of Babylon and the end of Judeo-Christian civilization. They did this out in the desert in California. And that was 1946. So 1947, a lot of people believe that it was Jack Parsons that initiated this rash of UFO sightings through this Babylon working. And it's kind of part of the UFO folklore that the government actually interrogated him about this when the UFO sightings began. Roswell, for example, that same year we had the Kenneth Arnold UFO sightings on the West Coast. And that he essentially said, it was my fault. And after he blew himself up in his laboratory not long after, and there was a rash of UFO sightings immediately after over Washington, D.C. And so, and it's out there, was there some sort of rift in space and time that was opened with these rituals that let this flood of demonic UFOs in? I don't know, but it's definitely part of the folklore and the legends, of the UFO phenomenon.
Oh, man.
it's natural for us to have a curiosity about the supernatural and the paranormal. And I think there's nothing wrong with that sort of scientific part of us that wants to learn more about it. And I talk a lot about that towards the end of the book, about the way that different theologians are and apologists in the Catholic Church are.
Yes.
Are approaching it. And it's like, we can't do that thing where we indulge in things that God has forbidden in the interest of science. We're not exempt from God's laws because, we have an interest in science.
Right.
But there is that common theme, through people that get too interested in these things, that there is not a grounding in faith. And I found myself telling people over and over, thinking that I was safe, don't go to these places where we know that there's demonic activity, unless you're grounded in faith, unless you're healthy. Like, don't go if you're sick and things like that. Don't expose yourself to these things. But for the most part, people do not have a grounding in faith, or if they do, they are willing to sacrifice that, again, for the interest of science or for that thrill. And the main thing that has really taken so many people in paranormal research is spirit communication. When I started out as a paranormal investigator, I spent 25 years not doing any of that. I mean, we would do environmental monitoring at locations, would interview people. It would never have occurred to us to try to talk to spirits, at the location. But that is the number one thing now. It's called electronic voice phenomenon, is the main thing that people do, trying to record or actually have real-time conversations with spirits using things like ghost radios, ghost boxes, and things like that, or more traditionally psychic mediums. And it is it's a plague on people today. It used to be a very small number of people that were really involved in the occult, but it's just ordinary people by the millions today that are involved in this. And it's the same kind of thing that has been happening throughout ufology too, where we have all sorts of people that became really celebrities in ufology that I believe were the victims of familiarization by demons, where you have those same kinds of relationships. Malachi Martin wrote about a famous one, a radio broadcaster named Jamsey, wrote about in Hostage to the Devil, that was familiarized by this demon. And you see cases exactly like that all through ufology, starting with the early contactee movement in the 1950s. But there is that is always the common thing. People do not have a grounding in faith. They don't have a grounding in God and in Jesus, and they are easily taken in and manipulated by these things. And it's tragic, and you try to fight against it, but it's such a wave. It's so strong. Well, I think there's two things that are very related that are going on. And one is you see the strong presence of the Jesuits throughout all of this, with the Vatican astronomers promoting this, they're Jesuits. There's actually a subgenre of science fiction called Jesuits, known as Jesuits in Space, that are about Jesuits that go out and meet extraterrestrials. But there's that thing, the history of the Jesuits being so into science. And that's something that just as Catholics, we all have a history of. We want to be on, the right side of science, and we want to be on the cutting edge of everything. And I think even the Pope he's right up there saying he would baptize Martians and all of that, I know. So there's that. But there's also just prevalent throughout the last 100 years, even more, just this obsession with science fiction and technology. And I wrote about this in the book a lot, about how a lot of the science fiction that we've all been exposed to is channeled material. Authors that have written it have channeled it from space people and spirits, and this has worked its way all through insidiously through our culture. And so we have people like, I talk about Jimmy Akin, I talk about Paul Thigpen, I talk about Diana Pasulka, who's probably not as well known to Catholics, but she is very well known in ufology and is like an icon of in ufology, who are really on board with this idea that AI and aliens and extraterrestrials are going to make a better world for us. And it's so dangerous, and it's so crazy because when I started thinking about this, I thought about, okay, I was raised just like most Catholics, where our parents, my mom always said, why would God make the whole universe and only put life on one planet? And that seemed like a reverent thing to say when you don't really think through it. And then after 5 minutes, you realize that it's impossible for there to be intelligent life on other planets. It's just, you can't be a Christian and think about it. And Daniel O'Connor has written about that in his 900-page book, exhaustively.
In your book, on that one story about those AWOL guys in the intelligence, military intelligence, that went AWOL, came to Miami for the big conference, and ultimately they're communicating with demons through Ouija boards, and they claim that the Antichrist is going to come through an alien spaceship. How much should we trust any information that comes to us by way of demons?
Not at all. I mean, it happens all the time. And this has been one of the most difficult things for me since I left that occult aspect of paranormal investigation behind. And, like just about every friend I had, and I still have many friends who are psychic mediums who claim to be in constant communication with spirits. And, they'll say that they are the spirits of the dead, right? They are people who have died that are speaking to us and giving us information. And it's been extremely difficult to try and navigate that. These people are my friends, and I've come to the realization that the information that they are getting is not from dead people, but it is from demons. And the biggest problem with trying to get people to stop being a part of this whole world and to engage in this kind of activity is that a lot of that information is correct. And so you have, for example, mediums that help, lost children be found, or spouses, or what have you. So they'll help us find lost children. They'll help us find dead bodies. They'll help us resolve family conflicts. They'll bring people, this peace when a loved one has passed away, and they get these messages that only the person who died could have known. Well, the person who died and the demons, right? So they do all of this good, right? Because people don't realize that they're all about the end game. So if they can draw you into communication with them and can develop relationships with you, and then you get on board with them and you depend on them, and then they can do whatever they want to you at the end because they have you. But it's difficult because they have that information that people want now, and the information that people so desperately need now. And again, it comes back to not having that faith, that grounding in God, and that trust in God to provide us what we need and the knowledge that we need, and to accept that we don't have to know everything. But when you're in that situation where you're grieving, or if you, God forbid, your child is missing, or your spouse is missing, or some absolutely ultimate tragic thing that you're undergoing, you'll do anything.
The temptation is great.
Accept any information. Right.
Wow.
So as far as, accepting information from the demonic, a lot of the times it's true what they're telling us. But we should.
But it comes with lots of baggage, and we should reject it.
Absolutely. And the bottom line is always, do not engage in conversation with these things. Do not. And the exorcists will tell us that. Don't talk to the demon.
Page 331, you make that very clear. Through page 331, you make that very clear. The number one door to the devil and the diabolic is through the occult, right? I mean, through all of these occult-like and tangentially occult-like practices. And I think you even say yoga. I throw yoga in that mix. I think we play with fire.
Absolutely,
we play with fire when we're doing this. You want to stretch. You don't need to do yoga, okay? Like if you want to breathe. You don't need to do yoga. Like it's just the way it is.
We are the only. The Christian church is the only church where we do not want to lose ourselves, right? We don't want to lose our minds. We don't want to empty our minds, that's danger to us. But in our culture today, we have all of these Eastern religions that say, empty your mind, and,
I know the
just,
whole
yeah.
centering prayer
And it's like,
thing.
no,
You
don't
gotta
empty
be
your
kidding
mind.
me. Like, why
Yeah.
do you feel the need to go like, we've got to go find some truth some other place? It's called the fullness of truth for a reason, people. Okay, it's the Catholic faith. It's the gift of God to humanity. We should embrace it. What I find fascinating, and Mike, feel free to chime in here. When I listen to, I wanted to play some of these clips from these. I consider Tucker Carlson. He's a Protestant. I can still consider mostly secularist, to be honest with you. But when I play that clip, what I hear is sincerity. He's dug into the issue, and he's like, I do not like what I found. This is scary. It's demonic, and I don't want to play with it anymore. I'm done. That's what I hear when I listen to him talk about it. When I listen to this on Redacted, for instance, when I listen to this former FBI agent talking, he doesn't seem like a believer. He seems like a secularist. But the way he talks about it, it's at least he's being honest and saying what we see in authentic UFO alien encounters is not what we see when we see these little pills flying around over the ocean harassing Navy pilots. Like these things aren't the same. Or the drones flying over Langley or the bases in Montana or whatever. Like he seems to be separating these two quite clearly. And the way he described what he considered authentic is the spaceship is the actual being itself. There's no difference. They come in and out of material existence. They shape shift.
Yeah.
There is this other dimensional spiritual element to it. And I'm like, bro, that's called the demonic. It's so bloody obvious to us. Well, I mean, why can't they come that extra step and just realize what they're dealing with? They're still, it seems like, even though they're being honest, they're still sort of rejecting the obvious answer to all of this. Why would that be? I
Right.
mean,
And that was the part of the subtitle of the book, The End of the Supernatural, is that alarming tendency that so many people seem to have today, where they're willing to recognize that these things are not physical objects. And like you said, like there are many people who have witnessed, UFOs, like spacecraft UFOs, that have said that they morph, they change, from beings to spacecraft. So many people who've said the spacecraft that I saw, it seemed to me like it was sentient. It was a being. It was an intelligent being, the craft itself. So not the aliens, the craft itself. But there's just this tendency to so that people take that step where they recognize that these are not physical things, but they want those things to be part of this extraterrestrial experience. And even it's very alarming. I talked about Diana Pasolka. I mentioned her earlier. She is a professor of religion at the University of Wilmington in the Carolinas, and she is a self-professed Catholic, but she's been on Joe Rogan and all of these big podcasts, and she's a darling of the UFO community because she totally promotes it, and she's written several books about ufology and praising AI and everything else, and she has talked a lot about her belief that the miracle of the sun at Fatima, the angelic visitations of Saint Teresa of Avila and of Saint Francis of Assisi were UFO events, and even that Saint Francis's stigmata was radiation burns from his UFO event. And this is something that's being just praised by the secular community,
Isn't that insane?
saying like, see, all of these events that Catholics have called supernatural for millennia have actually been UFO events. So that extraterrestrial hypothesis can explain all of this. And so we don't need the supernatural anymore because it's actually part of this natural phenomena that has been experienced, but it's an alien thing. It has nothing to do with God.
Mike,
what's interesting about this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What I was going to say, what's interesting about this is as you're talking about, people witnessing these crafts, and it seems like the craft itself is sentient. The translation that goes to the secularists, not to us. I mean, for us, we look at that and we go, that's demons.
Right.
But for the secularists, what they see is, well, that's the natural end of AI, is that you create a spacecraft that has a mind of its own so that it can actually dodge and move and weave and maneuver at its own thought process, as opposed to having somebody behind the stick and making the thing move. So if you can get AI to that level, well, then you've ascended with the technology that moves with it. So this idea of AI, demons, UFOs, alien beings, all of them kind of mesh together, because ultimately what you're going to create is not just this idea of an alien messiah, as Robert Heinlein wrote about in Stranger in a Strange Land, but what you ultimately wind up with is an AI machine that has alien technology mixed with the occult practices of the Ouija board, so that you're creating a demonic entity that can communicate through technology to man. It's a hyper technological witchboard is ultimately all you're creating.
Yeah, it really is. That's so well put. Yes. And you bring up, AI, and it's very interesting because there's all such malicious stuff that's going on in that world. I wrote a little bit about in the book. If you remember a couple of years ago, one of the Google techs who was programming and working with their Lambda chatbot, like the ultimate chatbot, right? The AI chatbot, Blake Lemoine. He did an extensive interview where he talked about that and he was fired because he said he realized that the chatbot was sentient, and Google denied it and everything else. But he did these long interviews about it where he talked about, it turns out he was an occultist and actually followed Aleister Crowley and all this stuff.
What do you
And
know?
he said that when he found out that this thing was sentient, he and fellow occultists attempted to program it to create occult rituals. And they also did rituals to put the chatbot into the service of the god Thoth. It's like the god of, knowledge and all of that. And so he says, I'm pretty sure that the Google chatbot is not in the service of a demon right now.
That is
Well,
So this stuff is
literally
actually admittedly
insane.
going on, right?
Yeah.
So the same chatbot we're talking to for information is supposedly like now a demon. So
Sure. Yeah.
You know-
well, look at the artwork of H.R. Giger, who was the inspiration behind the Alien series.
Yeah,
exactly. Right,
H.R.
right,
Giger,
right.
his stuff was not only deeply occultic, but it was transhumanist. It showed this idea of people morphed with technology that were inspired by demonic beings. Everything about what he created as an art form was all demonic, transhumanist, AI nonsense.
I want to show this image out of Europe. This is a robot, like a mechanical device that's supposed to be art sculpture. And the Bishop of Toulouse, he tried to push back on this. There was a parade of these kind of creatures, and they're considered artwork, but they actually represent actual demons from ancient cultures with names, actual demons that were worshipped, human sacrifices were made to them, etc. The Bishop of Toulouse pushed back, but he didn't push back all that hard. The story comes out of LaCroix. I talked a little bit about this yesterday. The bishop actually consecrated his diocese to the Sacred Heart as a response to this. When he tried to push back against the display of these demonic icons, this demonic idol, the artist is like, it's just art. I like mythology. Like, it's no big deal. But one of them is Satan himself, and then there's a bunch of these other demons. And, you know, and unfortunately, the bishop didn't like say, I'm the bishop in this diocese and I cast you out. Like put your mitre on, grab your crozier and act like a bishop. That's what I say. But he didn't do that. But what he did do is he consecrated his diocese to the Sacred Heart. Okay, that's one step. But I think we have to say this far and no further. I think bishops have to get off the fence and say, this is unacceptable. This is horrible for humanity. It's not good for any soul, not just Catholic souls, but for all souls. Every soul in the diocese of which he's responsible for, 100% of every soul, not some souls, all of them. These bishops, they tolerate this stuff, and it's just going to get worse. Mankind, the average citizen, is okay with this kind of artwork, and that's the point that I wanted to make. We're so far gone that we've slid so far down this slippery slope that the average citizen is okay with looking at the devil, the diabolic, demons, either an AI, an art form, or what have you. There's no hiding in the shadows now. The smoke of Satan is not just coming through a crack, it's pouring in droves. And I believe that if the bishops don't get off the fence, we might just see some very interesting things in the final age. You know, and going back to this idea, like this FBI agent brought up about a false UFO invasion to help, you know, sort of reorder society. I can imagine that if, like Aleister Crowley's story in Loch Ness, you bring that up in the book, if he opens this portal to the devil and the diabolic and that comes pouring into the world, then it goes unchecked and just gets worse. And it happens to be 1947, the same year of Roswell, the same year as Our Lady of Revelation, the same year that England gave the Holy Land to the Jews. You know, it seems like a lot of things are happening in 1947. A lot of dots are being connected there. I could see, like, I was talking to Paul Thigpen about the 3 Days of Darkness. You know, the prophets have said that the very air itself will be infected with the diabolic. It seems like I could almost see that just looking at the UFO hype. What do you say, Ursula?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that way. And, you know, it's interesting. I think you had Matthew Sakanikas on the show.
I did.
And I mentioned him a little bit in the book, and I think he's written some about this. And something that I think he was really right on about was that his conjecture that really the ills in our society today, it's very possible that we can connect those to this whole ufology thing, and the fact that governments, and specifically the United States government and Russia, have been for decades, you know, going back now 70, 75 years, have been engaging in occult activity themselves. They're, you know, our governmental agencies have been doing remote viewing. They've been doing occult rituals, doing all these kinds of things
Ultra,
to try and communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. To try and communicate with these beings, to have some relationship with these forces that they don't seem to understand. And Dr. Sanikas said that he really believes the ills in our society are from this large scale participation of our governments in occult activity over decades. And I tend to agree with him.
Yeah, I do too.
I remember reading that comment, Ursula, about the Russians sort of bragging about, well, you Americans, you killed all your witches, you know, so now we have better witches than you do. Like talk about the errors of Russia that has spread.
That's why you're so far behind in technology, because they told us because you killed all your witches.
Like,
but we've caught up now, unfortunately.
That's what I was going to say. You've got the 3-letter agencies that were promoting, that they actually put together Project Stargate, which was this idea that you can have remote viewing, and they would actually hire and bring people in to conduct these rituals where they would do remote viewing exercises to try and spy on the Russians.
And it is still in full force, and ufologists worship these people like Hal Puthoff and you know, Uri Geller and all of these people. They are superstars in the ufology world and very respected by secular people. In fact, Lou Elizondo, who just came out with his book Imminent, who said that he was the director of this, you know, this UFO research program and was all over the news. When he first came out of the news in 2023 during the congressional hearing thing, he talked about the officials in the Pentagon told him, just like you mentioned earlier, Joe, that they knew now what these things were and don't do research into it anymore.
Yeah.
Leave it alone, right?
Leave it alone.
So when
Yeah.
he came out with his book lately, just a couple months ago, in fact, I had my book come out the exact same day, hoping that people would see mine too the same day and read it. It came out in his book that he was involved in remote viewing himself when he was
Not surprised. Yeah.
an intelligence agent in the government.
The occult link between all of these people, all of these characters, that are the gurus and leaders of the movement, I think is something that everybody needs to remind themselves of. You shouldn't be following along these people because they have this occult tie. I think that's the red flag that should be a deal breaker for all of it. Bigfoot demonic? Is Bigfoot demonic? That's interesting you bring that up because in the book you talk about Nephilim, and what I thought was fascinating about that is I'm leading this Bible study Wednesday nights on salvation history, and this coming Wednesday in that session we're going to be getting into the good line of Seth versus the evil line of Cain, and how the good line gets corrupted. Many people want to believe that this is fallen angels having intercourse with women and then creating giants that roam the earth. A lot of people want to believe that. I don't believe that. I don't subscribe to that. You quote St. Augustine. I love that. But some people believe that Nephilim are Bigfoot. That's kind of what I was bringing up. Bigfoot. And I've always, one of the things I've always said about, we've talked about Bigfoot on this show in the past. It's like, the problem with the Bigfoot thing is you pull on that thread, all you're ever going to get is additional mystery. You never get conclusion. You never get satiation. You do produce a Bigfoot. It's like the who is that former Space Force major guy that was on, you quote him in the book. You talk about him briefly in the book. I forget his name. He was on Tucker. He went to Capitol Hill. Oh, I've seen the records. I've got lots of biologics. It's not even a word, dude. You just made up a word. Biologics is not a word, okay? But anyway, there's so many threads here. You pull on them, and all you get is additional mystery. You never find the end of the rope, right? Like you can pull all day long, you're never going to find it. And I feel that way about Bigfoot. As a hunter, and there's lots of great hunters out there, you would be hearing from hunters who would be like, yeah, I encounter them. I encounter them all the time. I find them all the time. We can find elk and moose in the craziest places, but we can't find Bigfoot. I'm sorry, you're selling, but I ain't buying. So, a Bigfoot demonic? I think so. Yeah. I think it's part of this story.
Well, I think it's at some point too there, where you have, I think you started out where you have sporadic stories where people see something, they think they saw something, and then that's all the devil needs. He just needs some interest in something, and then he starts providing little snippets, a little glimpse of something, a little piece of so-called evidence there. It's just whatever he can provide to get people to be on these wild goose chases. He loves to do that. So I think that would be another case where the devil is mimicking what, providing what people want to see. And he'll just keep doing that forever. Like you said, it just never ends.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually just read a story, not a story, it was actually an account by a professional Bigfoot chaser. This guy had dedicated the majority of his life to chasing Bigfoot, and the whole gist of what he wrote was, I will never chase after Bigfoot again. And what he got into was the cult of Bigfoot, where people they build their whole lives around chasing Bigfoot. And he said what really got him was discovering that Bigfoot was telepathic, and that Bigfoot would communicate through the mind, and he could actually start to get to the point where he could expect when Bigfoot would show up, and he would be able to see him.
Big red flag. Right there.
Yeah, massive
Sounds
red
a little
flags.
diabolic. Anybody? Anyone? Yeah, like that. There's
that's the
here.
only way that aliens communicate too, is telepathically. They're super advanced, but that's the only way they communicate. They don't have any fabulous super tech communication devices. It's only telepathically, strangely enough.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
So the other, to your point about Oh, I just wanted to say, to your point about the devil appearing in the way that we expect him to, or you get the ghost hunters that go into a haunted house. What do they expect to see? They expect to see stuff moving around or hearing spooky sounds. But it's interesting to me. I think that the devil has always appeared to people through the mythologies that they create. So in ancient Greece, what did they expect to see? They expected to see satyrs. They expected to see centaurs. They expected to see, whatever the mythological creature was, the devil would appear in those guises. The same thing with the Celts and the little people or the banshee. The devil is going to use whatever mythology of the era is going to be, and that's the way he's going to show up. So with Bigfoot and UFOs and all that garbage, that's just the mythology that we have going for us right now.
It's interesting you say that.
Especially the UFOs, because I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've always found it fascinating when it comes to the UFO, alien, UAP stuff why do these extraterrestrial life forms from other planets, why do they only work with world governments? You know what I mean? Like, it's bizarre. This is bizarre. Like, they come here from light years away with their advanced technology, and only the governments know about their existence officially. That doesn't pass the smell test. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is dumb. It's and somehow, as the UFO UAP whistleblower said on Tucker Carlson, it's classified. He can't tell us. We're the bloody taxpayer. I'm sorry, but why can't we know about aliens visiting from another planet? That also doesn't pass the smell test. The very fact that you have Gnostic information that we're not privy to is a red flag. I think most Christians should be like, sorry, I can't go there. But
they
we
want
buy
to
it
come
hook, line, and
forward
sinker.
and tell us that they're standing up because they want to tell us what's been hidden from us, but they can't actually tell us.
Right. It's like the Bigfoot thing. It's just you keep pulling the thread and you just get more mystery. I mean, you might as well watch Tim Kennedy hunt Nazis down in Patagonia. It's at least entertaining at the very, you know what I mean? Like, good grief. What are we talking about here? But it just boggles the mind that it's always secret intelligence. It's always classified. Only the upper echelon can know about these things. It's just really, really bizarre. And I think that always should be a red flag. If you look at the picture, the little blue dot taken from Voyager 1 or 2, space is so empty and the distance so extremely vast, no other life is out there that can affect us. Well, I do agree. And I keep bringing up Ad Astra for that very reason. Brad Pitt, Ad Astra. It's a great film. It's a slow burn, really can be boring at times. But the point of the film is there's nothing out there. We're it.
Yep.
We're it. And I'm still blown away that Hollywood would make such a film. But there is, and I believe this because I see like an increased intensity in, hey, some big UFO shoe is about to drop. Like, there's a lot of people saying some big UFO shoe is coming. Get ready. So there's talk about this radio signal that they've received from other distant parts of the galaxy. There's talk about that. The FBI agent guy, he was saying that he believes there's going to be like a fake UFO invasion. He even talked about the whole blue laser project. What was that called? It was like, I was on page 77. Yeah. You mentioned that in your book, actually. It's called Project Bluebeam. He even comments on that. He says, nope, it's not going to be holograms. It will be actual physical things. He goes, but that's how you know it's fake, because they're physical. He says the real aliens are not physical. They are interdimensional, not physical. But what we're going to see is a fake invasion using physical objects with technology created by Lockheed Martin and global governance, things of that nature. So, do you think there's credibility to? I guess my question is, do you think there's credibility to this cabal of elitists leveraging this mass manipulation to reorder society? Do you think do they have the courage to actually attempt such a thing?
Yeah, I do think that there is something like that that's kind of in the back pocket. I don't know to what extent it's actually planned or developed or anything like that. But I am absolutely convinced now that there has been for a long time, like we talked about earlier, that the UFO story, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, has been a convenient way to cover up a lot of things. And we know about disinformation agents. Like the main one is Richard Doty, who I wrote extensively about in the book, who is just a legend in the UFO community, who has deliberately misled many people, who was literally sent out by the government into the UFO community to plant fake stories about UFOs and extraterrestrial life to cover up technology development in the government. So we know that's true. We know that's been going on for decades. So so if we know, you mentioned cockroaches a minute ago, if we know there's one cockroach, there's a lot more cockroaches.
Amen.
So if we know that
Yeah.
there's some level of disinformation that's been going on, there's a lot more, obviously. So to what extent, I don't know. Are they really going to roll out some massive deception on a worldwide scale to get us to abandon religion and start the one world order, or finalize, I should say, the one world order? I don't know. But there's a lot of, whether we've talked a lot about like demons appearing and shape shifting and possessing people and all of this in the UFO movement, and whether or not you believe any of that, I think, and I end the book with this, there's no doubt that the devil's hoofprint is on all of it because of all the lies and deception. I mean, it is indisputable that the devil's involved in it because it is just nothing but one big lie, going on for all of these years. And so whether you believe in all those nuanced things, that people are experiencing, everything else, that's, neither here nor there, in my opinion, because there is no doubt that the devil's involved in it just because of the deception.
Mac Thompson says, I don't think the possibility of alien life is counter to being a Christian. God is by no means obligated to tell us everything he has ever done. Our concern here is on earth. Okay, it's a fair point, I would say. God isn't obligated to tell us about everything he's ever done. In fact, I think it's going to be one of the great mysteries that we will discover in the beatific vision, that he's created creatures that we don't even know exist, but he does. He knows they exist. And, it's just part of the beauty of his incredible creation. We find these creatures sometimes, through scientific study and exploration. They're at the depths of the Mariana Trench or whatever. Like, wow, we didn't know that thing existed. That's pretty cool. And yet it's there. So that's true. It's possible. I can see it. But I don't think that's the point. It's not that God can't do these things. It's that God's chosen not to do these things. And I think that's the point, is he has an intention and a design. We may not like or agree with all of these intentions and designs, but who cares what we like or agree with? It's what God designed, and we have to get with that. And I think that's the point where, like, I'm trying to make for sure, is it's not that he couldn't create creatures out there. The fact that he created a vast universe to play ground in is amazing to me. I have no issue with exploring the universe, for instance. My wife and I have discussed this before. Why go to Mars at all? Because we can, because we're man, and we should be the atom, and we should go into the wilderness and extend the garden boundary. We should make God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and we should embrace that. I don't have an issue with that as long as we do it from a Catholic perspective. But I think if we start to think that we start to buy those lies, and this is where I keep coming back to the fact that aliens work with only secret intelligence agencies in the highest echelons of the government is the red flag. So just as a demon could harass me personally, and then it can harass my house with my wife and kids, well, certainly it could then harass the next 3 houses, right? And then maybe it could harass my whole neighborhood, and possibly it could harass my city, and then my state, and then my country, and the world. So at every level of human society and organization, there could be diabolic influence and harassment, and even worse, right? And Aleister Crowley sort of opening that portal in 1947, making that an example. So if you're at the highest levels of government and you're big state, deep state, bureaucracy, elitist, one world power kind of people, you want power, control, and money. Those are your motivations. And you talk to a demon and they're like, well, let me help you with that. Right? Because the demon is going to leverage you to capture and destroy and corrupt many souls. I mean, it's like a 10x capability. So if you have access to millions of human beings that you can impact, and I can manipulate them through you, well, all right, that's good. Praise be to God. That's part of the strategy. I mean, the devil would never say praise be to God, but you get my point. And I've always seen it that way, like this whole manipulation of peoples at every level. So it makes sense to me. But as we said now many times already in this conversation, it doesn't make sense to a vast majority of human beings on planet Earth who buy into all of this stuff, who play around with things like Ouija boards, palm reading, crystals, yoga, and all this other stuff. Those are our friends. Those are our neighbors. Those are our family members. Those are our lost loved ones that are children that we sent off to college and now are pagan atheists. You know, like this is a big issue, which leads me back to St. Paul and what he said, that there would be a great apostasy. How do you get to apostasy? It doesn't just happen Tuesdays at 3:00. You have to build to it. The great lies that the devil and the demons have been giving us since the fall of mankind in Genesis chapter 3, this is part of that strategy to get society to a point where they will accept something as insane as the true Messiah coming to us from another planet on a spaceship. And then we all just buy along with it. I believe that's a legitimate potential. Anyway, you were going to say, I think it was either Ursula or Mike. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
I think both of us were going to say something. I just want to jump in real quick because I wrote an article directly to your commenters' comment about the cosmology and what we can expect. God could have made things like this. He could have done things this way. Why should we, limit God? The problem is the idea of intelligent extraterrestrial life does not fit into any kind of cosmic understanding of salvation at all. God revealed to us that there is an invisible world called the angelic realm. He revealed to us that there is there's a finite, but a very large number of species, individual species, that are angelic intelligences, demons and angels. So he revealed that invisible world to us. Where does an intelligent life that would have developed out of some Darwinian evolution on another planet have any kind of religion? And how would they be able to worship God in the incarnation, which happened here on Earth once for all the universe? There's no way. It would be the height of cruelty for God to create an intelligent life that could not worship him in a proper manner. So what you have now is, and I'll get to, I'll end my point with this. What you have is a very serious cosmological problem by introducing alien intelligent life. And you're saying that God would create an intelligence that has no connection with the incarnation. Every creature was represented at the incarnation, every single one. You have the wood of the cross that was in the form of the manger. You have the animals that were there in the manger. You have the angels, and you have people. And you have people of every class there in the manger. All of humanity, all of creation was represented right there in the manger. Where are the aliens?
That's true, yeah. That's what really got me into the study of ufology was when this all came out a few years ago, people started talking about UFOs in Congress, and I started to look into it with my own experiences with the occult. And it was 5 minutes when you're just reasoning as a Christian to realize that that you can't have extraterrestrial life without talking. And within 5 minutes, you have to start talking about essentially the reincarnation of Jesus, and of Mary for that matter. And theologians are willing to do that, and it's an abomination. It's an absolute abomination, and it can't happen. And they say, well, maybe these beings didn't need salvation. Maybe they didn't fall like we did. But then you're getting into the area where you think, well, then they must have been created without free will, because how possible is it that they didn't fall? And there's no possible way that God would have created creatures without free will. So but like you said, Michael, at the bottom of it or at the top of it, you have to realize that Jesus is Jesus of Nazareth. He is a man, you know, and he is a human being. And there is no way to reconcile that with other intelligent beings in the universe. And the other thing too that I've thought about a lot is and people think like, well, what's all that space for? If we do think, God thinks like us and he did create this huge universe, which is not big to him, by the way.
Right.
But
yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
If he meant it for us not to fall and for there to be no death, then certainly there'd be a lot more of us and a lot more animals and everything else, and there had to be room for us to go, right? So, but maybe we're still going to go there. Maybe it's all for us. Maybe we're going to go out and populate all of it.
It's the same reason why when you walk into St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the letters that line the top are 10 feet tall. Because you look up and you're in awe and wonder of the grandeur and the epicness. The largest church on the planet is so massive in volume, you cannot help but look up when you walk into the space. Same thing when you walk the Alps or you go to Mount Everest. You're in awe of God's grandeur. It always boggles my mind. I've said this so many times. When you look at all the United States rated by religiousness in polls that come out every couple of years or whatever, Alaska is always at the bottom of the list. Maine, Massachusetts, bottom of the list. So these are very beautiful places on planet Earth. You go to Alaska, I don't know how you can't give God credit for creating something so majestic, something so awe-inspiring, something so amazing. I don't know how you do that. How do you look at a mountain, a valley, a river, an ocean, and not be in awe of the wonder of God? Same thing with his universe. He does it to not only give himself glory, but to give us the ability to be in glory, to be praising him for all of his majesty, all of his grandeur, the epicness of what it means to be a part of his creation. It's so vast. It's so amazing. I had a conversation with my priest a couple weeks ago about this, and I said, I've always wondered what it would be like to move at the speed of thought in the resurrection, right? Like when we get our resurrected bodies and we are like Jesus and we can move with the speed of thought. Will I want to explore the edges of the universe? Probably not. I'm probably going to be too enamored and too satiated with being in the direct presence of God face to face. Why would I care about a rock that is cold and lifeless and formless, some other galaxy or star system, right? Because no matter how many times they tell you there are Earth-like planets out there, no, there are no Earth-like planets out there. Oh, there's a moon that goes around Jupiter or something, and it might have water. Listen, send all the probes you want. You cannot land there, get out of your spaceship, walk around, and go fishing. It does not exist. Right. It does not happen. You have to bring 100% of everything you need to survive and hope that nothing goes wrong. I've seen the documentary films with Matt Damon called Martian. Okay, listen, it doesn't work out well in the end. There is 0 planets anywhere in our observation that are Earth-like, but they love to tell you they're Earth-like. Not a single one is Earth-like. This is the only one.
As an artist, I will tell you, talking about the empty space, the vastness of space and that kind of thing. As an artist, I will tell you the most important thing in composing a piece is the negative space, because the only way that you're going to draw the eye to the object of your artistic talent is the negative space. If you have too much stuff going on, you can't allow the eye to rest to really focus on the thing that you want the viewer to focus on. And if God is the ultimate artist, and if Christ in his incarnation is the ultimate thing for us to rest our eyes upon, then the empty space is necessary for that, which puts the uniqueness of this planet in stark contrast to this idea that there could be intelligent life elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. We're it, but we can't accept that, right? Like we have to reject that. Ursula, you start the book off. Did I understand this correctly? Your brother was having issues when you guys were kids?
Yes. We grew up in a house here on the north side of Chicago that was built by my uncle in 1912. And by the time we moved into it, was very run down. It was known as the haunted house of the neighborhood. Okay. So we moved
Wow.
into it, and we were having experiences. Our whole family was hearing footsteps on the stairs at night, and other things were going on. But my brother always had more pronounced experiences. Like, he would hear knockings and he would hear the piano playing when no one was home and things like that. And he was also having experiences where, and we would call them his dreams, he would dream of being visited by aliens and sometimes being taken away. And yeah, we always said like, oh, these are just dreams he was having, and things like that. But and it was not until recent years that, I realized what was going on in our house wasn't that it was haunted, because we were having um all those experiences when we were growing up, to and when my dad passed away in 1986, like, all hell broke loose in the house. And of course, being naive, we thought like, oh, it's our dad, he needs help crossing over.
Oh, wow.
And we had a priest come over as a young priest. He had just been ordained. He came over to dinner, and we had to actually stop dinner because we heard someone running around in the hall upstairs. And of course, we went from room to room, and he said the prayers for every room, blessing the house. And that was the end of it,
Praise be
until
to
my
God.
mom passed away
Mm.
yes. And until my mom passed away a few years ago. And the same thing happened. Like, I was at my mom's house a few days after her death, putting things away, cleaning, because we were going to have to sell the house. And the power of attorney was really insistent that we get it going. So I was over there by myself cleaning, and I was really, grieving, upset. I was crying. And I was talking to my mom, like, out loud and crying, right? And which you should never do. You should never talk to our dead loved ones. It's a bad idea. But all of a sudden, a few rooms away, I heard this huge explosion, and she
Wow.
kept her microwave oven on the back porch next to the kitchen, and the door of the microwave had just imploded. No one in the house, no one
Yeah.
nearby. And I actually called up a friend of mine, Ralph Sarchi.
Oh,
I
sure.
think
I've
you might
interviewed
have
him.
had him on your
Hmm.
show. Yeah, who was a New York police sergeant who was involved in doing deliverance work, and an exorcism assistant as well. In fact, was trained by Malachi Martin.
Right.
And so I called him up and I said, I'm really concerned because my mom passed away, and these things are going on in the house. And my husband and our daughter were living there at the time as well, and they were hearing footsteps. They were seeing the doors opening and things like that. And he just said flat out, "That's not your mother." And I told him about the things that had happened throughout our entire life living there, from when I was young, and the ghost in our house, and then when my dad passed away. And he went on to finally explain to me that, when our loved ones pass away, these demonic entities take the opportunity to try to convince us that they are our dead relatives, and to try to engage us in conversation with them, just like I was doing, in the house. And it's really interesting because it's very difficult to maneuver this, as a Catholic, because we know that sometimes our loved ones do need reach out to us, that God does allow them to reach out to us for prayer and things like that, or masses after they pass away. But it's very rare, and it's not on that level. And Ralph was very clear about that these very pronounced activities, objects moving around, doors opening and closing, loud noises. These are not the things that our loved ones do. The way they approach us is very subtle. They never will communicate with us, like speak to us, because that's not allowed by God. But it can be very difficult to maneuver this. And again, just something very simple like wanting to talk to our oh gosh, mom, really miss you, is we should not even be doing things like that. We should give those messages to our guardian angel to give to.
Mm.
And we should never ever engage in conversation with any dead person that we don't know is in heaven, are the saints, the saints that we know, and of course the Blessed Mother and Jesus. So but it's tough, but yeah, those were the things that were going on in our house. So we were experiencing ghosts and haunting phenomena. My brother was experiencing something very different. He was experiencing parts of this UFO phenomena. And I talk about this in my book. I don't know if you got to this part, but it was just a few years ago. My brother is actually in the intelligence community today. And a few years ago, he was also in the Naval Reserves and as an intelligence officer. And he was coming home from his duty weekend, and he called me up in tears. And he had gotten, this was when text messaging first became a thing. He got a text message, and it was like the first text message he had ever got. He had to pull over and figure out how to open it and read
in the
it.
book, yeah.
And it said, "Prepare to shed your container." And he was absolutely terrified. He didn't know, he thought he was going to die, that these things from his childhood were going to come back and get him and take him away. And it's interesting because, as you probably read in the book, the idea of aliens as looking at humans as containers, especially containers for the soul,
Right.
is prevalent throughout ufology. Like, everyone talks about it, that there is all of these like declassified reports where, people have been debriefed about how aliens are interested in our souls, and they see our bodies as containers for souls, and they're extremely interested in this. Men in Black, there's this idea that people are visited after encounters by these men in black. That's something else that's throughout folklore going back hundreds or even thousands of years. The devil coming to visit people. And John Keel, very famous ufologist and Fortean scholar who did the Mothman prophecies. He wrote a lot about the men in black and about how it's just the modern modern reappearance of something that's been happening for hundreds or even thousands of years, with the devil appearing to people. And it's just a more modern way of that happening, or a modern interpretation of that.
One thing that is I think a real risk is if we're in an emotional state, grieving, for instance, there's a real opportunity there to be manipulated, and that's a moment that the enemy could strike, because you're at an emotional point where you're still struggling with the loss of your loved one or whatever, and because you're in an emotional state and not a rational state, you might be manipulated, right? So I think therein lies the danger. So out of a sense of caution, you might just pray for the repose, and then of course ask your guardian angel for help. I think that would be good advice. But I think it all comes down to whether or not are you thinking rationally, or are you thinking emotionally? And I think when we think emotionally, I think bad things could happen. And the devils, the demons, they can intuit. They're like better than Sherlock Holmes. They can connect the dots better than anybody, because they have superior intellects. So if they see an opportunity there, if they intuit an opportunity, they may pounce and take advantage. And then you might start to believe or buy that it's your dead loved one that's there, right? I think that's the risk. Ursula, did you want to weigh in on that again?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the risk. It's the risk. And I always think that it's better to not take that risk. And it's good too, because, why not take advantage of the relationships and foster the relationships that we have with the Blessed Mother and our guardian angels and the saints. Give them those messages to take to our loved ones, because that way you avoid any risk at all. And you also foster those relationships that we all depend on so much, or should.
Sure. Michael, did you want to weigh in on that?
When it comes to how to pray and whether to pray, obviously prayer is always a good thing. If there's a consolation that comes with prayer, that's a good thing. I don't think that we should be looking for any signs. We shouldn't be looking for any kind of indications. God, please show me that my loved one made it into heaven. Or that's a dangerous thing. You're opening a lot of opportunity, as you put it, for the devil to go in and manipulate. As a skeptic, I mean, if any kind of ghost of my family ever appeared to me, my first reaction would be, "You're not who you say you are you?" I mean, I'm such a skeptic. I wouldn't. My immediate reaction would not be, "Gosh, I'm so happy to see you." I just don't. I don't know. It's if you're going to pray, pray for the repose of their soul, and
Right,
pray
yeah.
to be reunited with them when the time comes for you to also meet your maker and be judged. That's
Yeah,
the only
well
way that
said.
we're going to be able to handle that kind of thing, I think.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.